pressure mounts on Justin Trudeau. Canada removes anti-India posters. Surrey Gurdwara asked to remove posters of Indian diplomats. Posters called for killing of Indian envoys. Is Trudeau toning down his India rhetoric? Top focus on 5 Live.
Is Trudeau toning down his anti-India rhetoric? Where is his misadventure heading? I'm going to give you a very sober analysis and a dissection of 1 week since Trudeau began his tirade against India. I'm Shiv, this is 5 Live. Thanks as always for being with me. These are the headlines first. Big terror glare on Khalistani gangster Arsh Dala in Canada. Charge sheet reveals Arsh Dala and Nijjar linked in terror. Arsh Dala allied with Pakistan's ISI and Lashkar. Surprise, surprise. India Today, meanwhile, accesses Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu's dossier. Reveals Pannu's plan to radicalize Kashmiris. All his properties in Chandigarh and Amritsar have been seized by India's NIA. Prime Minister Modi tears into the Congress in his Bhopal rally, says Congress leaders no longer run the party and urban Naxals are now running the grand old party.
कांग्रेस का ठेका अब कुछ अर्बन नक्सलियों के पास है। कांग्रेस में अब अर्बन नक्सलियों की ही चल रही है।
Big boost in the Indian Air Force's future airlift capability. The Indian Air Force inducts its first Airbus C295 new generation military transport aircraft. 55 more of these will be built and supplied from Spain and also an Indian production line in Gujarat over the next few years. A day of gold medals for India at the Asian Games in China. Indian women's cricket team gets gold. 10-meter air rifle trio of Rudraksh Patil, Aishwarya Tomar and Divyansh Panwar also win gold at the Asian Games. In the last 6 days, viewers, some of us have felt our blood rise over a reality that we've only lately discovered. That Canada, a country we've always regarded in mostly positive, if vanilla light, is an active safe haven for individuals proscribed by us here in India as terrorists. We have the Canadian Prime Minister to thank for ensuring that an entire generation of Indians now knows this well-hidden reality, one that has been collecting dust on the shelves of time. But today I wanted to go a step further and tell you where it actually all started. Let me take you back to 1982. Indira Gandhi, who was then Prime Minister, had requested her Canadian counterpart, Pierre Trudeau, Justin's father, to extradite a man named Talvinder Parmar, wanted in India for the killing of policemen. Trudeau Sr. swiftly rejected Indira Gandhi's request. With the Canadian Prime Minister himself stopping such an extradition, Talvinder Parmar, thus far in just Canada, just a citizen trying to be in hiding, emerged without fear, living like any other Canadian with full rights. According to authoritative accounts, Trudeau Sr.'s intelligence setup tracked Parmar. They are said to have been spied on Parmar and his associates, conducting bomb tests on Vancouver Island post-1982 after Indira Gandhi's request was rejected. Amazingly, critical evidence was either lost or deliberately destroyed by Canadian authorities after that. Well, emboldened clearly by this free run he was getting by the Canadian government and from the Prime Minister's office no less, Talvinder Parmar went on to lead the terrorist group Babbar Khalsa in Canada, and just 3 years after India's extradition request was declined, he became the architect of an infamous mid-air bombing, one of the worst in world history. On June the 23rd, 1985, Air India Flight 182, named after Emperor Kanishka, took off from Toronto to Bombay, 31,000 feet in the air and off the coast of Ireland. A bomb hidden in a transistor radio in a suitcase exploded, breaking the aircraft into pieces and sending it plunging into the sea. All 329 persons on board that Kanishka flight perished. 268 of those were Canadian citizens. The Kanishka bombing trial, as you can imagine, was a famous sham, with Talvinder Parmar acquitted for lack of sufficient evidence. But the deaths of so many Canadian citizens meant that Talvinder Parmar could no longer take his safe haven for granted. But so arrogant was this Canada-protected terrorist that he continued to travel to the country that actually bankrolled that entire terrorist operation. Of course, you know which country I'm talking about. It's Pakistan. In 1992, Parmar had the audacity to cross from Pakistan into Punjab, where he was then gunned down by the Indian police. Now, you would think that the death of 329 people, including 268 Canadians, allegedly at the hand of a man India had been raising the alarm about, would force at least a minimum amount of introspection in Canada, if not a policy shift in Ottawa. But no, the architect of the worst mid-air terrorist attack before 9/11 lived a full life as a Canadian citizen. And let me tell you that none of this changed Canadian policy on providing a safe haven to India-proscribed terrorists. Another prominent Khalistani linked to the Kanishka bombing, Ripudaman Singh Malik, was shot dead by hitmen last year in Canada, years after being similarly acquitted in the terrorist bombing. And now the son of that same Canadian Prime Minister who refused an Indian extradition continues the shameful legacy of his father. He has sat on Indian information about Khalistani terrorists for over 3 years now, and now uses the death of one of them, Hardeep Nijjar, to brand India an extraterritorial killer in order to curry favor with extremists ahead of a losing battle in next year's Canada election. As you watch everything that happens now between India and Canada and wonder how things could get this vicious with a very vanilla country, remember that it began with an Air India flight 31,000 feet in the air named Kanishka. Today on my show, I wanted to introduce you to someone who lost his entire family in the 1985 Kanishka bombing. Sanjay Lazar is with me. He has spent his entire life without his family because they were all lost. His parents, his sister, they were all lost in that terrorist attack. There has been a complete whitewashing of the people responsible for it. A completely laughable sense of responsibility has been taken by Canada, and no justice has been served for the 329 people who died on board that aircraft, including 268 Canadian citizens and the parents and sister of the man you see on your screen, Sanjay Lazar. Sanjay, a privilege to have you with us here on India Today. Thank you for taking the time out. I know you've been looking very closely, Sanjay, at everything that's been unfolding over the last 6 days. What are your thoughts about what Trudeau did 6 days ago in blaming India for an extraterritorial killing? I want to get that answer from you first before I go into Kanishka. Sanjay.
I've been looking for it for 38 years, actually. But yes, Shiv, thank you for having me on your show. It galls me to know that, Canada, after sitting on the killers of 331, actually, you're forgetting the 2 in Tokyo who died with the same bomb. 331 people, they protected them for 38 long years and fostered a complete anti-India force that wants to secede from India within their boundaries, is now talking about the death of a terrorist on their own soil, possibly killed by their own people. And it's shocking. I mean, I heard your run-up to the show, and it was not the tapes were not erased by mistake or lost. They were wiped clean.
Yes.
The evidence was all there. They test fired the bomb 2 weeks before the actual bomb. So let's understand that this is a state that has looked the other way. And they cannot now point fingers at India 38 years later and say, this happened and this guy is our citizen. Because it was all their citizens who killed our people. My family. I know so many other families. I know so many other victims' families. I mean, who have bonded with me over these years. So that is a shocker for me. It's an absolute shocker.
Sanjay, I want you to describe, and 38 years is a long time, but I can imagine that, some things never really heal. But I still want us to go back and to take our viewers back to 1985 to tell us, what happened after that. Did you at that point of time, I'm sure you must have had some hope with such a gargantuan attack and a tragedy and so much loss of life. A part of you must have felt sure that justice would be served.
Well, Shiv, I left from Bombay to London and then to Cork to try and find, at that time as a young kid, you still have hope. You believe in dreams. You think, the aircraft is floating. Maybe you'll find people, they'll swim. And when you reach there, you realize the futility of the situation, and then you start looking at everything around. The thought of justice doesn't come up until you've started mourning. You come back, you bury your dead, and then you look. We always hoped that there would be justice. I always dreamt that there would be, somebody who would answer for these crimes. It was a tragedy to learn, for years, there was almost little or no investigation that came forth. And when the criminal investigation did come forth, we were invited maybe 5-6 years later to go to Vancouver for the trial. I mean, I literally sat 10-15 feet away from the killers in a bulletproof glass cage. And I've seen them. And they grinned, and they all knew that nobody would come forward. They had silenced and killed witnesses during that trial, before that trial. And there was just no justice. Even the evidence that was left on the table after the tapes were erased and the witnesses were removed was enough to convict in any normal country. They were found innocent of 331 lives, deaths, killings. And
yes.
Sorry.
Sanjay, I just wanted to say, you've seen this up close. You've seen the anatomy of how a country has protected these killers for 4 decades now. An entire generation of Indians is now waking up to this, to this side of Canada. Most people in India, I dare say, regard Canada with a kind of middling positive light. Nobody really has ever thought of this side of Canada, of being a safe haven for terrorists, an active colluder with these groups to try and completely cover up and expunge all evidence of one of the worst terror attacks in the entire world's history, not just Canadian history, but world history. Can you explain, tell us a little bit about that journey, how you actually saw this being unfolded? The Vancouver bomb tests, these tapes being erased, etc.
Shiv, a lot of this didn't come out till after they were found innocent. Let me be clear. We didn't know. This was so secret. All the victims got together, and there is an organization that they've created in Canada called AIVFA. And it's a victims organization. And it's, we put pressure on politicians in Canada and India. And they finally, after 3 criminal trials and a couple of sham inquiries, they got the retired Supreme Court judge of Canada, Justice John Major, to set up a commission.
Yes.
And that happened 15 or 16 years ago. So that's almost 20 years after the bombing. And it's only when all that came out and everybody had to testify in an open hearing that we realized that Canada was tracking this guy from December of 1984. That's 6 months before the bombing.
Yeah.
They had watched him come in. He had watched him assemble a team. They had watched him get the tuners, the Sanyo, tuners to place the bombs in. They had got the raw material. They watched him do everything. They watched him go into the woods in Duncan, in Vancouver Island, and test fire the bomb. There was a secret operative there. So it's not that they didn't know. They had a system of erasing. Well, they used to just erase tapes when they found something. So they knew. Let me also tell you, the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was visiting US on a state visit just before. Even the Secret Service visited Parmar and Rayat. They with the CSIS, they checked them out just to see nothing would happen on American soil. So it's not that North American intelligence forces were not aware to the threat. The threat perception existed. There were documented threat perceptions, and they just turned their eye to it, blind eye. It's the politics of vote banks. I can't say anything else. I mean, today's Prime Minister is surviving because of a party or two parties that support him, which support the same fringe, radical fringe groups that run that country literally today. If you go to Western Canada,
yes,
you know that it's run by them. It's not run by not run by the Prime Minister.
So Sanjay, you're saying that even the deaths of 268 Canadians among the total number that perished in this disaster, was nothing in front of vote bank political compulsions, and that it wasn't enough to shake Canada and to change its policy of accommodation for these people, these extremists. You're saying that?
I'm saying that, yes, absolutely. I'm saying that with, the Kanishka bombing in the rearview mirror, Canada should have, and after John Major's commission, Canada should have changed its politics internally.
Yeah.
You cannot see, I mean, it's like, just because somebody from the Al-Qaeda starts becoming an honest politician, doesn't make the Al-Qaeda honest or doesn't make them a political party. You cannot, I mean, Leopard doesn't change its spots. And their country should have realized that these are groups that you should not be permitting to preach this kind of stuff. They're, and let me be clear on this. It's a very small, minuscule percentage. The Sikhs are wonderful. They are peace-loving.
Absolutely.
Lovely race. And let's not paint everybody with the same brush. There's a very small, minuscule percentage.
Correct.
And these are the guys who are going about spreading hate, putting diplomats' pictures on gurdwaras where it shouldn't be. That's a place of prayer and worship. I go to a gurdwara. I've gone to the Golden Temple so many times. It's not where you radicalize religion. And you're allowing few guys like this to turn a country that has strong democratic principles into wasteland. There's absolutely no difference between what Al-Qaeda was doing before 9/11 in the desert of Afghanistan than these guys are doing. So, I mean, people must wake up. Canadians must wake up. And who are they talking about? Who are they accusing India of having killed? Let's no mistaken identities happen here. I'm not condoning any extrajudicial killings. I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I'm saying, I'm a peace-loving person. Okay, I've seen how my entire family got destroyed. But let's understand, this is a guy who was preaching in places, in open, places of worship, lionizing the killers of Kanishka.
And the Canadians were calling it freedom of speech, Sanjay. The Canadians were calling it freedom of speech.
There is a limit. Freedom of speech does not mean you change and twist history. Freedom of speech means you speak what you want, but you don't make somebody who's, killed 331 people into a hero. He's not a hero.
And Sanjay, I don't know if you saw the pictures. It has taken all this while. It has taken an entire week of global heat and a global glare on the Trudeau government for those posters. And we have those images also, which we'll show our viewers, of those posters coming down. Posters being, brought down from that Sarai Gurudwara. It has taken all this time, 6 days of an uninterrupted glare on Trudeau for finally someone to issue orders saying, "Acha, freedom of speech humne bola hai, lekin let's change our minds a little bit because the heat is getting too high." My final question to you, Sanjay, now is, Looking at what's been happening over not just the last 6 days, you've been looking at this for 38 years, Sanjay, but if I could narrow it down to just the instances of the last few months, you know, the big rallies in Brampton, you know, the calls for a referendum, you know, the threats being issued for Indians to leave Canada and things like that. How does that make you feel? For someone who lost his entire family, you know, I can imagine you looking at this as history repeating itself and nothing ever changes. But how are you seeing this now?
Well, Shiv, first of all, if it took 6 days to bring down the posters, I'd say, you know, let's hope in the next 6 months we bring down this government. You know, you need Canadians need to look inward and stop this pandering to radicals. Number one. Number two, it's, you know, I have seen and watched closely the rallies and the speeches and the hate speeches, and I don't think any civil country democracy should permit that, and it sickens me. It does. It saddens me and sickens me because I know, you know, there are some parts of Canada that are so wonderful that would never allow this to happen, and some good governments and some people who would have stepped in. I think this is taking liberal values to an extreme where it's allowing you to derail democracy with, you know, the power of the gun. People are not even scared to even speak honestly today. And I genuinely hope that there is change and there is, you know, stricter rule of law. You draw a line in the sand. You know, you don't foster radicalism, secessionism. Have freedom of speech by all means. You can call anybody any names. You want to criticize my prime minister, by all means, do it. He knows how to take care of himself. India will stand strong. We have our own 2 feet. We don't need these.
So true.
You know, but do not, you know, foster criminals. Nijjar was, you know, we all know what he was. I mean, you don't even need to explain. You can't. It's like calling, you know, Osama a freedom fighter. Is that what you know? Then the Americans have to answer why they entered Pakistan. You know, that's also another point of view.
Very true.
And that's why, you know, the history is being erased. Like you said in the start of this show, there's a whole generation that doesn't know what happened. Which is why I'm trying to record it for posterity, for history, that, you know, these things happened and we should never forget them.
I'm very glad that you're going to be recording it for posterity because Sanjay and I chose to begin my show with the story of Kanishka and with you because it's one thing to listen to an entire litany of international relations experts and geopolitical commentators. It is entirely another thing to listen to someone who has materially lost everything as a result of the direct actions of the leadership of this same country in a similar situation 4 decades ago. History repeating itself is an easy thing to say, but it is terrifyingly apparent in what we've seen over the last few months and weeks in Canada. Sanjay Lazar, we always wish you well, wish you peace, and wish you good health and luck in your mission to make sure that people never forget what happened, and let's hope it never repeats itself. Thank you, Sanjay, for being with us.
Thank you so much, Shiv. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, what a week it's been for Justin Trudeau. It began with his big attack on India, trying to link India with the killing of terrorist Hardeep Nijjar. Well, it's very important to refresh your memory about what has been an uninterrupted list of embarrassments for Justin Trudeau. Take a look. It hasn't been a good week for the Canadian Prime Minister. It's been 6 days since he dropped the diplomatic equivalent of a nuclear bomb on India-Canada relations with this.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Since then, it's been an uninterrupted downslide for Justin Trudeau. Politically ridiculed, diplomatically criticized, and isolated even by his closest friends. As we mark a week since Trudeau's quest to paint India the assassin of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Nijjar, let's see how it's going for the Canadian Prime Minister. For starters, India hit back instantly with a visa blockade, stunning Team Trudeau. Canada's conspicuous lack of reciprocal action not only showing weakness, but the country's helpless dependence on Indian labour and workers in Canadian industry. Second, Trudeau's attempts to rally the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, the world's so-called Anglosphere. But each of those major powers, the US, UK and Australia, provided only token words of support, nothing near the kind of backing Trudeau was hoping for. In this game of optics, it was clear Prime Minister Trudeau was all alone in his mission against India. The third big embarrassment for Trudeau, the claim from one of his own allies that his allegations against India are based on open source information available on the internet.
The only briefings that I've been able to receive from CSIS are what are called open information briefings or open source briefings, which is information that's available to the public doing an internet search, which I find frustrating.
The fourth big blow to Trudeau were his plummeting popularity ratings, with his political opposition using the moment to mount a ferocious attack on him.
I think we need to see more facts. The Prime Minister hasn't provided any facts. He provided a statement, and I will just emphasize that he didn't tell me any more in private than he told Canadians in public, so we want to see more information.
Fifth, and probably most embarrassingly, Trudeau's closest government ally, the Khalistan sympathetic Jagmeet Singh, virtually threw the Canadian Prime Minister under the bus, putting out this tweet, where he cunningly fitted in a criticism of his close friend Trudeau in an unrelated issue, hoping to offset the heat on himself. Sixth, with the global glare now fixed on his accommodation of terrorists on his soil, a shamefaced Trudeau had to order the offensive posters to be pulled down from the Surrey Gurudwara. Posters honouring terrorist Nijjar and calling for the killing of Indian diplomats. Seventh, with India stepping up the pressure and seizing Indian properties of 19 Khalistani terrorists, including several based in Canada, Trudeau will likely begin to face unbearable heat from the very section he's been trying to milk for politics. And finally, with a list of Canadian Khalistanis whose PIO and OCI green cards are all set to be cancelled, ending their chances of easy travel to India, Trudeau will face the music from extremists who took their India linkages for granted thus far. As you can see, it hasn't been Trudeau's week. Bureau Report, India Today. You think you've had a bad week? You think you've had a really bad week? Please spare a thought for the Canadian Prime Minister. He has literally no friends right now on the back of his Khalistani adventure against India. Even his pals are shuffling their feet and sidestepping away from him. And it's a really bad look a year before Canada's next election. I mean, think about it. Let's cut the BS and boil this story down to its bones. Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, who joined Prime Minister Trudeau to name India last week in the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Nijjar, has since been completely silent. Not a single word out of her when you'd think that she'd be doing the heavy lifting for her boss on a diplomatic issue. Nope. Finger on lips for the last 6 days. She's gone completely silent. Meanwhile, Trudeau's closest ally, Jagmeet Singh of the NDP, has quietly dropped Justin like a hot potato. But he's tried to be a little clever about it. Instead of attacking Trudeau on the diplomatic mess he has triggered with India, he's instead attacked his ally on housing prices in Canada. Very smart, Jagmeet, but I'm sure common Canadians aren't really that stupid. Indians certainly are not. Now, you'd think the Premier of British Columbia, the Canadian province where terrorist Nijjar was shot, would be more supportive of Trudeau's allegations, given the demographic in the area. But even David Eby has poo-pooed Trudeau's allegations, calling them the result of a Google search. Meanwhile, Canada's leader of the opposition, who on day one fumbled with a measure of support for the Prime Minister on what he thought was a sensitive issue, has since wisened up, seeing the diplomatic backlash Trudeau has faced. Cleverly, the leader of the opposition has now seized the issue to attack his opponent, the Canadian Prime Minister, seeing juicy mileage ahead of next year's election, for which he's already smelling blood. Well, Canada's closest ally, the US, has said nothing beyond a few token boilerplate words like taking allegations seriously. You'd think that reports that US intelligence had helped shape Trudeau's allegations would be a face saver for Trudeau, but Washington has been careful not to join Justin in the diplomatic hole he apparently has dug for himself. Now, Trudeau was hoping British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak would be a little bit more sympathetic, but has badly misjudged that friendship as well. Because on the back of a super successful India visit for the G20 that included Sunak's promise to act against extremists in Britain, Trudeau had to make peace with being rebuffed by yet another friend. But what's likely to hurt Trudeau the most is that his campaign against India may not even bring him the minimum local political mileage he was clearly aiming for. Because with India seizing Punjab properties of Canadian Khalistanis and moving to scrap their OCI PIO cards, these Khalistani terrorists are ironically likely to take their frustration politically out on poor Justin Trudeau himself. And if all of this wasn't bad enough, Trudeau, thought it was a good idea to honor and give a standing ovation to a World War II Nazi in the Canadian House of Commons. Understandably infuriating the Jewish community, not just in Canada, but around the world. Like I said, if you've had a bad week, please just spare a thought for poor Justin Trudeau. I want to bring in now an expert view. I've given you my view. I want to bring in, one of the most well-regarded views on this entire diplomatic fracas between India and Canada that's been playing out now for 6 days since Justin Trudeau mounted those allegations against India. Michael Rubin is Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Mr. Rubin, a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time here on India Today. It's 6 days since those allegations played out. We've seen several different things happen from the Indian side, Mr. Rubin, including, the actions taken on the visa front. The Indian government is now seizing properties of proscribed Khalistani terrorists who are supposedly based in Canada as well. What is your overview of what these 6 days have looked like?
Well, certainly this was a storm that within the United States we did not see coming. And we are just simply being reactive to it. I believe that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has made a major mistake, even when he tries to drag the United States into this by saying that some of this intelligence was actually sourced to the United States. What we understand from the New York Times reporting is the United States provided some context after the scene, but not a smoking gun. And this may be one reason why Justin Trudeau isn't willing to expose what he was basing his statement on. It really seems that he has made a mistake, and the United States just desperately wants to help him save face, quiet the volume, so that we can fix the situation. At the same time, Canada has been caught red-handed hosting a terrorist.
Mr. Rubin, sometimes in the media we tend to oversimplify, the complexities of a diplomatic situation. There is a view, or there is a perception that Trudeau has been abandoned by his friends or rebuffed by his allies, and that he's completely isolated in this situation. None of the countries that would seem to be close to Canada want to have anything to do with this sort of diplomatic mess Trudeau has landed himself in. Is that a fair assessment of where things are?
I believe that is a fair assessment. Look, there's two issues. One is the diplomacy. The second is the intelligence. Yeah. When it comes to intelligence services and the Five Eyes share intelligence for the sake of, on the trust that their intelligence isn't going to be exposed. Justin Trudeau has put themselves into a position where they feel that they have to, he's trying to pressure them to expose intelligence. I mean, this isn't why Canada would be included. And remember, the United States is already very upset with Canada for failing to meet its defense obligations, which is why it's not part of the AUKUS sort of alliance that has been growing. So there is huge frustration here. There's also huge frustration that if this happened, what was Canada's fault in allowing a terrorist to be there, to allow itself to be used for terror finance for this sort of extremism? Why didn't Canada take Indian quiet diplomatic overture seriously? Justin Trudeau has a lot of explaining to do, not just about what he said in Parliament last Monday, but going back years.
We're going to have to wait and see what those next steps are. It's uncertain. Both countries, looking at each other very closely at this point of time. Many implications. We'll have to see how it actually unfolds. Michael Rubin, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for being with me and your time here on India Today.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got some breaking news coming in now. Big blow to the BJP's Mission South on the road to 2024. The AIADMK of Tamil Nadu has just formally broken its alliance with the BJP. Just months ahead of the 2024 election, the AIADMK has exited the NDA ahead of the 2024 elections. The AIADMK has just put out a statement to say BJP leaders are targeting AIADMK leaders, and they've passed a unanimous resolution exiting the National Democratic Alliance headed by the BJP. So this is a big blow to the BJP ahead of the 2024 election. A key southern ally exiting from the NDA alliance.
அனைத்திந்திய அண்ணா திராவிட முன்னேற்ற கழக தலைமை கழக செயலாளர்கள், மாவட்ட கழக செயலாளர்கள், கழக நாடாளுமன்ற சட்டமன்ற உறுப்பினர்கள் ஆலோசனை கூட்டத்தில் ஏகமனதாக நிறைவேற்றப்பட்ட தீர்மானம். அனைத்திந்திய அண்ணா திராவிட முன்னேற்ற கழகம் இன்று முதல் பாரதிய ஜனதா கட்சியில் இருந்தும் தேசிய ஜனநாயக கூட்டணியில் இருந்தும் விலகிக் கொள்கிறது என்ற ஏகமனதாக தீர்மானத்தை அறிவிக்கப்படுகிறது.
Okay, we're taking a very quick break. On the other side, I'm going to give you an update on the Chandrayaan 3 program that you've probably been waiting for. That comes up on the other side. Stay with India Today.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company.
The Canadian Prime Minister on 21st September acknowledged India's global clout.
There is no question that India is a country of growing importance and a country that we need to continue to work with, not just in the region but around the world.
But before this, since Monday, his comments and accusations riled up New Delhi, and relations between India and Canada started to spiral downwards with each passing day. On 18th September, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced in his parliament that Indian agents could be behind the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Khalistani terrorist wanted in India.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Canada expelled an Indian diplomat over what it called an involvement of a foreign government in its internal affairs.
We expect India's full collaboration to make sure that we get to the bottom of this. And as of today, and as a consequence, we've expelled a top Indian diplomat from Canada.
Within hours, New Delhi retaliated by expelling a senior Canadian diplomat. India responded saying Canada's accusations were absurd and politically motivated to shift the focus from Khalistani terrorists and extremists who are being allowed a free run there.
The phrase which came to my mind was actually a Hindi phrase, which was "Ulta Chor Kotwal Ko Dante." I mean, if anybody has a complaint, we have a complaint about Canada. You know, what I said earlier, the space that they're giving to Khalistanis and to violent extremists. So I was very perplexed by what I heard.
At the center of all this is the murder of 45-year-old Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He was gunned down on 18th June in Surrey. India had declared him a wanted terrorist. The NIA had issued an arrest warrant for Nijjar, accusing him of carrying out terrorist attack in India. The Indian Prime Minister had taken up the issue of Khalistani extremists getting a voice in Canada in his bilateral meetings with his Canadian counterpart in Delhi on the sidelines of G20. Trudeau claimed he had discussed Nijjar's killing with Narendra Modi. But Trudeau's allegations in Parliament started to complicate matters further. A day later, India issued a hard-hitting advisory on hate crimes, urging Indian nationals and students in Canada to be cautious.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a BNP Group company.
A major rallying point for Khalistani supporters in Canada. In Australia, in the UK, a so-called Punjab referendum, unofficial and binding on no one. A voting exercise aimed at diasporic Sikhs, asking them whether they want the Sikh majority Punjab in India to become a separate Khalistan. The man behind this sham exercise, Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, a lawyer of US and Canadian citizenship, whose Sikhs for Justice organization is proscribed by India. Born in Amritsar district, he fled to the US in 2007 after being implicated in a criminal case. The Indian government has designated him a terrorist. Make no mistake, Pannun's so-called Punjab referendum has no base whatsoever in Punjab. The Khalistan movement lost popular support in the early 1990s in the state. Elections take place peacefully from panchayats, the state assembly, to the Lok Sabha, with a huge turnout. Surveys show as high as 95% Sikhs take pride in their Indianness. Separatist voices, if any, appear like a flash in the pan, once in a while, and vanish into thin air. Barring the stubborn fringe, most of the diasporic Sikh community, totaling some 2.5 million people, is not a supporter of Khalistan either. And within the fringe, Bannon's referendum exercise is